You ever notice how sometimes the smallest cracks are the ones that let everything fall apart? That's how it started for me. Just a small crack. A glance. A sentence that felt slightly off. And before I knew it, I was spiraling into a truth so twisted, so beyond anything I could have imagined, that even now I sometimes wake up wondering if any of it was real. It started 6 months ago. My daughter Lila had just turned 8. She was bright, too bright really. The kind of kid who asked why the sky was blue at age 3 and then corrected my grammar by 4. She had these big hazel eyes and the kind of laugh that made strangers turn and smile. My whole world orbited around her. And then the accident happened. We were driving back from my sister's house. It was a Sunday afternoon. Nothing out of the ordinary. I remember Lila humming to some song on the radio, legs swinging from the booster seat when the truck came out of nowhere. I swerved. I remember the screech of tires, the sickening crunch of metal. And then just darkness. When I woke up in the hospital, they told me I'd blacked out for 6 hours. Minor concussion, fractured wrist, bruised ribs. But Lila, they said she'd been thrown from the car, landed in a ditch a few feet off the road. Unconscious but alive. No broken bones, just a small gash on her forehead. The doctors called it a miracle. At first, I was just relieved she was okay. I held her hand as she lay in that hospital bed, her head wrapped in white gauze, and I thanked God over and over. But that's when the cracks began. It was little things at first. The way she stared at me sometimes, too long, too intently. Like she was watching me rather than seeing me. Her laugh sounded wrong. Like she was trying to mimic it but hadn't quite nailed the rhythm. One morning, maybe 2 weeks after we came home, she asked me, "Mommy, what was my favorite color again?" I smiled. "Green, sweetie. Like the one you wore on your birthday." She paused, nodded slowly and said, "Right? Green. I like green." But she didn't. She hated green. Always said it made her feel sick. Her favorite color had been purple since she was 3. I brushed it off at first, had trauma, memory loss, nothing to panic about. But the changes kept piling up. She didn't want peanut butter anymore, even though she used to love it. She started sleeping with the lights on, something she'd never done before. She didn't call her teddy bear by its name, Mr. Pickles. Instead, she kept referring to it as the bear, like it was a stranger. One night, I woke up to find her standing by the window just watching. When I asked what she was doing, she said, "Waiting for the stars to move." "What do you mean?" I asked. "They move when you're not looking," she replied. I laughed nervously. "Okay, kiddo. Back to bed." But my skin prickled as I tucked her in. By the 3rd week, I confided in my sister, Amy. She's a nurse, level-headed, practical. "You're traumatized," she said. "You almost lost her. Maybe you're just noticing things that were always there." Maybe. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Then came the breaking point. It was a Friday evening. I was folding laundry when Lila came up to me and asked, "What was the name of my first pet again?" "Whiskers," I said. "Your bunny. You carried him everywhere until you were 5. She stared at me blankly. "No, that's not right." I looked up. "It is. You cried for a week when he died." She tilted her head. "I think you're thinking of someone else." My hands froze mid-fold. I sat her down. "Sweetie, do you remember our trip to the beach last summer? The one with the jellyfish and the sandcastle contest?" She frowned. "I don't like the beach. You begged to go back every day for a month." Silence. That night, after she went to bed, I dug out the photo albums. Pictures of us at the beach, her face smeared with ice cream. Her 6th birthday, green streamers everywhere. Mr. Pickles clutched tightly in her arms. I flipped through every page, a knot tightening in my stomach. She was in the photos. She looked like Lila. Sounded like Lila. But something deep in my bones whispered, "This is not my child." I told myself I was being paranoid. That trauma does weird things to people. But I needed to be sure. I scheduled a DNA test. Just for peace of mind, I told myself. The results came a week later. 99.9% probability. No biological relation. I sat on my kitchen floor staring at the paper, my heart pounding so loudly I couldn't hear anything else. There had to be a mistake. Maybe they mixed up the samples. I called the lab twice. No mistake. The girl sleeping in the room down the hall was not my daughter. But then who was she? And where was Lila? I wanted to scream. I wanted to run into her room and shake her and demand answers. But when I walked in and saw her lying there, small and peaceful, arms wrapped around Mr. Pickles like she'd always done, I froze. She looked like Lila. She sounded like Lila. But she wasn't Lila. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. My mind spiraled into every possible explanation. Was she switched at the hospital? But that made no sense. There were no other children in the accident. Was it some sort of identity mix-up? But how could that happen? And more than anything, why did this child believe she was Lila? Unless she didn't. Unless she was pretending. That night I woke up to a sound. A faint creaking. I tiptoed down the hallway and found her standing at the kitchen counter, scribbling on a piece of paper. I watched from the doorway, my breath caught in my throat. She didn't see me. Her handwriting was messy, shaky, like she was still learning how to form letters. I leaned closer. It wasn't in English. It wasn't in any language I recognized. Symbols, curves, dots and slashes. And then she whispered something under her breath, barely audible, but I swear it made the hairs on my arms rise. I stepped back too quickly, knocked over a lamp. She turned. "Mommy?" she said, eyes wide and innocent. I was just getting water. I stared at the paper. Gone. She must have slipped it into her pocket. I nodded slowly. "Okay, sweetheart. Back to bed." The next morning she was normal again. Eating cereal, watching cartoons, laughing. But I knew. Deep down I knew. That thing wasn't my daughter. And whatever it was pretending. Pretending really well. But not perfectly. And the more I watched, the more I realized. It wasn't just pretending to be Lila. It was learning. Learning how to be her. And whatever it really was, it was getting better at it. Faster than I could keep up. You ever get that feeling like you're being watched? Even when you know you're alone, doors locked, curtains drawn, there's just something in the air that makes your skin crawl. That's what living with her started to feel like. I say her, but that's not right, is it? Because she wasn't Lila. And yet she looked like my daughter. Sounded like her. Smiled like her. But she wasn't. Not really. After I got the DNA results, I did what any mother would do. I called the hospital. I called the police. I told them there had to have been a mix-up, that the girl I brought home after the accident wasn't my child. The woman on the other end of the line, a social worker named Meredith, tried to stay calm. Tried to keep me calm. "Ma'am," she said, "there were no other children involved in the accident. Your daughter was airlifted with you. There's no record of any other minors admitted that day." I sent her the DNA results. She said she'd escalated. That was 3 weeks ago. I haven't heard back since. But strange things kept happening. I started keeping a journal, mostly to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Here's what I wrote on April 2nd. She stood in front of the hallway mirror for over 10 minutes. Not brushing her hair. Not making faces. Just staring. Smiling at herself like she was trying it on. That was the word that kept surfacing in my head. Trying. Like she was rehearsing. One night, I slipped into her room while she was asleep. I needed to see it, to believe it with my own eyes. I crept toward her nightstand. Carefully opened the drawer. Nothing out of the ordinary. A flashlight. Stickers. A piece of gum. Then I lifted her pillow. Underneath was the paper. The one she'd been writing on that night in the kitchen. Those strange symbols, drawn in blue crayon, filled the whole sheet. But the thing that froze my blood was the edge, torn. Like it had been ripped from something larger. I took it to Amy the next day. Didn't tell her what it was, just said I'd found a weird drawing and wanted to know if she'd seen anything like it before. She studied it for a long moment, then said, "It's probably just gibberish. Kids scribble weird stuff all the time." But she wasn't really convincing herself. She folded it and gave it back, but not before saying, "Maybe, talk to someone. A child psychologist. You both went through a lot." I nodded, but I knew that wouldn't help. Because I was starting to believe this wasn't about trauma or psychology or memory loss. This was something else. That night, I watched her sleep again. Have you ever seen someone pretend to be asleep? There's something off about it. Something you can't put your finger on, but you just know. She was too still. Her breathing too even. Like she was waiting for something. So I whispered, "Lila?" Nothing. Then I said it again, softly but with a sharper tone. Like how you do when you're not really calling someone, you're testing them. Still nothing. Then I leaned close and whispered, "You're not my daughter." And just for a split second, before she could hide it, I saw it. A flicker in her face. The faintest curl at the edge of her mouth. A smirk. She was awake. She heard me. And she enjoyed it. I backed out of the room slowly, my heart thudding so hard I thought it might wake the neighbors. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Ate her cereal. Chatted about school. Drew a picture of a horse with rainbow wings. And yet, something changed. She started calling me mother. Not mom. Not mommy. Mother. The first time I froze. "Why'd you call me that?" She tilted her head. Isn't that what you are? You've never called me that before. She giggled. Well, people change. The word sent a chill down my spine. Later that afternoon, I noticed something odd while doing laundry. Her clothes, 3 of her shirts and a pair of socks, were missing. Not in the hamper. Not in her drawers. I checked the washer, the trash, even under the bed. Gone. I asked her about it. She shrugged and said, maybe they flew away. What does that mean? I asked. She just smiled. Nothing ever really disappears. It just goes somewhere else. That night, I installed a camera in her room. I know how that sounds, but I had to. The next morning, I checked the footage. It started normal enough. She got in bed, turned out the lights. An hour passed, then 2. Around 2:38 a.m., she sat up, eyes wide open. She stood, walked to the center of the room and just stood there for 15 minutes. Then she looked directly at the camera, right into it, and she smiled. Not like a child, not like Lila, like something that knew I was watching. I slammed my laptop shut. The next day I got a knock on the door. A man in a beige suit and glasses. Said his name was Martin Greaves. Said he worked with Child Protective Services. He'd received a report of delusional behavior from my sister. I couldn't believe it. Amy? I asked. She was worried about the stress you've been under, he said gently. Mind if I come in? He sat in my living room, calm and professional. Took out a notepad. Asked questions. Took notes. Then he asked if he could speak to Lila alone. I hesitated. Just to make sure she's okay, he added. So I let him. They talked in the kitchen. I watched from the hallway. I couldn't hear much, just bits and pieces. Then I saw something that made my knees go weak. He smiled. She smiled back. But it wasn't a normal smile. It was familiar. Too familiar. Like they knew each other. After he left, she came to me and said, "That man is very nice. He knows about the stars." "What stars?" She giggled. "The ones that move." That night I called Amy. Left her a message. Told her I didn't trust the man who came. Told her something was wrong. I haven't heard back from her since. The next day, I went into Lila's room to clean. Opened her closet. Moved some boxes. And found the missing clothes. Not folded. Not hidden. But stuffed into the air vent. Why hide them at all? And more importantly, what else had she hidden? That's when I saw it. Taped to the back wall of the closet. Another drawing. More symbols. But this one had something new. A figure. A child's body with a hollow face. And in its chest, a spiral. Black and jagged and drawn over and over again until the crayon had torn through the paper. Beneath it, in shaky block letters. I am almost done. Almost done with what? That night I packed a bag. I had to leave. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay in that house another night with her. But when I went to get the car keys, they were gone. I ran to her room. She was gone too. Panic. Pure, consuming panic. I tore through the house. Checked every room. Every door. Every window. Nothing. Then, just as I was about to call the police, I heard her voice. Coming from upstairs. But we didn't have an upstairs. We didn't have an attic. And yet, the sound was clear. Above me, she was calling my name. Laughing. "I see you, Mommy." And that's when I realized there was a hatch in the ceiling. One I'd never noticed before. Right above the hallway. The same hallway where she stared into the mirror every day. I reached up, pulled it open, and stared into the dark. You know that phrase, once you see something you can't unsee it? It's true. And I don't mean just with your eyes. I mean once something enters your mind, once it settles in, it doesn't leave. It just sits there, whispering when everything else is quiet. I couldn't unsee what I found in the attic. She was sitting up there, Lila or whatever she was, legs crossed, hands resting in her lap, completely still. In the dim yellow light from my phone's flashlight, she looked like a doll someone had forgotten. Dust floated in the air around her like snow. I didn't speak at first. I just watched. She turned her head slowly, calmly, as if she'd been expecting me. "Hi, Mommy," she said. "What are you doing up here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thinking," she replied. "It's quieter here." I swallowed. "You scared me." Her lips curled slightly. "I didn't mean to, but sometimes people need to be scared. It helps them see better." I knelt slowly, flashlight beam wobbling on the insulation-covered floor. "See what, sweetheart?" She blinked. "What they've forgotten." Before I could ask what she meant, she stood up. "Can we go downstairs now? I'm cold." She walked past me like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just been sitting in a pitch-black attic that I never knew existed. Like she hadn't been whispering my name from the ceiling the night before. And I let her go. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't in control anymore. The next morning, I tried to act normal. Made her breakfast. Asked about school. She was polite, even sweet. Drew a picture of a cat with antlers and said it was her guardian. When I asked what it protected her from, she smiled. People who forget. Then she ran off to her room, leaving me alone with a sink full of dishes and a brain that felt like it was slowly unraveling. That was the day the woman showed up. It was just after lunch. A knock at the front door. Not frantic but firm. I opened it to find a woman, late 40s, graying braid, eyes sharp as broken glass. She didn't smile. "You're Mary Rourke?" she asked. I hesitated. "Yes." She looked past me into the house. "I need to talk to you. It's about your daughter." That word still twisted something in my gut. "Who are you?" I asked. "My name is Eva," she said. "I lost someone once too. I didn't know why, but I let her in." We sat in the living room. I didn't offer her tea. She didn't ask. "I saw your daughter at the grocery store yesterday," she said. "She was with you. In the cereal aisle. She asked you why Frosted Flakes were sad." I froze. That had happened. Exactly that. Lila, or it, had stared at the box and said, "Why does the tiger smile when the flakes cry?" I hadn't thought much of it at the time. "I followed you out," Eva continued. "I've seen that face before. Years ago." "What are you saying?" I asked. She reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was old, creased at the edges. In it, a little girl stood in a field of tall grass, holding a stuffed giraffe. She looked maybe 6. She looked exactly like Lila. "I took this picture in 1983, Eva said. "That's my daughter. Clara." I couldn't breathe. Clara disappeared in 1986. Vanished from our backyard while I was hanging laundry. No trace. No struggle. Just gone. I stared at the photo, heart thundering in my chest. That's impossible. Lila's only 8. Eva nodded slowly. That's what I thought too. Until I saw her. And I knew. A mother always knows. I wanted to scream. Something. But instead I whispered, "What are you saying?" Eva leaned forward. "I don't think that thing is your daughter. And I don't think it's mine either." She looked around, then lowered her voice. "I've been tracking stories. Cases like mine. Parents who swear their children came back wrong. Kids who survived impossible accidents. Ones who changed overnight. Cold cases closed quietly. Mothers institutionalized. Fathers disappeared." I stared at her. "You think what? That they're being replaced?" She nodded once. Not all at once. Slowly. Quietly. Carefully. "By what?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. Then, in a near whisper, she said, "Something that doesn't belong here." I shook my head. "You expect me to believe that there's some force out there replacing kids?" "I don't expect you to believe anything," she said. "But I think you've already started to." I hated how right she was. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. She reached into her purse again and pulled out a folded piece of paper. When she handed it to me, I recognized the symbols immediately. Same as Lila's drawings. But older. Precise. Etched in ink instead of crayon. "I found this in Clara's room the day after she disappeared," Eva said. I didn't know what it meant. Still don't. I unfolded the paper. Same spiral. Same slashes. But this one had something written beneath it in English. "Remember the original. Remember the empty." I looked up. "What does that mean?" "I think it's a warning," Eva said. "Or a clue." We both jumped when the door creaked open. Lila stood in the hallway holding her antlered cat drawing. She looked at Eva, then at me. "I like your friend," she said. "She smells like rain." Eva's expression didn't change. "Nice to meet you, Clara." Lila smiled. "That's not my name." And then she walked away. Eva left shortly after, but not before giving me her number. "If anything changes," she said, "call me. But be careful. They don't like being watched." After she left, I sat at the table with the 2 pieces of paper in front of me, Lila's crayon scrawl and Eva's inked relic. Almost identical. And then it hit me. The symbols weren't just drawings. They were part of a language. A language only certain people could see. People who had forgotten something important. And that's when I realized what she'd been saying for weeks. All her little hints. The stars. The mirror. The drawings. She didn't just want to be Lila. She wanted me to forget the real one ever existed. And she was getting better at it. Already there were things I couldn't recall. Lila's favorite bedtime story, the exact sound of her laugh, the way she said "I love you" before bed, slipping through my fingers like sand. But I wasn't going to let it happen. I was going to remember, even if it killed me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, Eva's note clutched in my hand like it was a life raft. My heart wouldn't stop pounding. I kept reading the same line over and over. Remember the original. Remember the empty. It felt like a riddle written by something that had never been human. Sometime around 3 a.m., I opened an old photo album. I needed to see her, Lila, the real one. But that's when it hit me. She wasn't in half of them. Birthdays, Christmas, even the beach trip where she got stung by a jellyfish. She should have been in every frame, sticky with salt water and grinning with a mouthful of goldfish crackers. Gone. I flipped through page after page like a madwoman. My hands were shaking. No pictures of her under the age of 5. None. Not even the ultrasound. My throat tightened. I remembered taking them. I remembered holding those prints in my hands, crying when I saw the shape of her little nose for the first time. So where were they? I called Amy. Again. Straight to voicemail. Something was wrong. It wasn't just her anymore. Something was eating through my life like acid. And then the faucet turned on by itself. I jumped. Water gushed into the sink. The handle hadn't moved. I shut it off, hands trembling. But in the puddle left behind, I saw something impossible. A face. Not mine. Not Lila's. Just watching. And then it was gone. I backed away, knocked a chair over. I didn't even bother cleaning it up. I just sat there until the sun rose. When it did, everything seemed normal again. She came downstairs humming, dressed and cheerful. Said she dreamed about a floating library where the books whispered when you turned the pages. "Do you want to hear what one of them said?" she asked, all innocence. I nodded numbly. She leaned close and whispered in my ear. "She's almost done remembering." I froze. "What did you say?" But she just smiled, skipped away and started eating her cereal. Later that morning I went to the library. Not the floating one. The real one. The last place that felt grounded. I asked for anything about symbols. Ancient languages. Lost civilizations. Secret societies. The librarian raised an eyebrow, but pointed me to the basement archives. Down there, in the dusty rows of forgotten books, I found something that made my blood run cold. It was an old, faded volume with no title on the spine. Inside were sketches of symbols, identical to Lila's. Pages and pages of them. One had a drawing of a child's silhouette with the spiral on its chest. Underneath, a single word. Echo. The text beside it explained. An echo is not a copy. It is not a replacement. It is a placeholder left in place of what has been removed. It learns the habits. It learns the love. But it has no memory of being born because it never was. The original is taken. The echo remains. And if the memory of the original fades, the echo becomes real. My whole body turned ice cold. I read it again. And again. A placeholder. Not a clone. Not a demon. A memory thief. And worse, if I forgot Lila completely, she would cease to exist. I stumbled out of the library in a daze. Sat in my car shaking. I couldn't stop thinking about the pictures. The ultrasound. The drawings. What if the attic wasn't built? What if it had appeared? Because I was losing my grasp on what was real? What if the more I believed in the echo, the less there was left of my daughter? I drove to the one place I hadn't been since the accident. The lake. The place where it all changed. I stood at the edge for a long time, staring at the still water. In the reflection I didn't see myself. I saw Lila. Not the echo. The real one. You may think I'm crazy. That trauma had snapped my mind like a twig. But there she was, standing just beneath the surface. Her eyes locked with mine. She mouthed something. 3 words. "I'm still here." And then the water rippled. I screamed her name and jumped in without thinking. The cold hit me like a slap to the chest. I swam down, deeper than I should have been able to. The light faded quickly. My lungs burned. But then I saw it. A shape in the dark. Curled up small. Like a child hiding in the folds of a dream. Her hand reached out to me. And I grabbed it. That's when the pull started. Not physical. Mental. Something tearing through my memories, yanking them out like weeds. I saw flashes. Her birth, her first steps, her laugh, her fever at age 3, the tooth she lost in the garden, all ripping away. I screamed underwater. But I wouldn't let go. Not again. And then, like breaking through glass, I was yanked upward. Gasping. Choking. I broke the surface and clung to the dock, dragging myself out. I looked around, dizzy, half blind. She wasn't with me. No one was. I coughed for what felt like hours, finally collapsing on the pier. And then I saw it, carved into the wood beside me. A fresh spiral. And one word beneath it. Remember. I made a promise to myself that day. I wouldn't forget her again. That night, I printed every photo I could find. Every email. Every social media post that mentioned her name. I scoured old backup drives. Called distant relatives. Collected fragments like a detective piecing together a dream. I built a wall in the basement. Covered it in memories. Every image, every sentence. Her drawings. Her handwriting. The tooth I'd saved from under her pillow. My shrine to the truth. The next morning, the echo was different. Quieter. She walked past the basement door and paused. Like she could feel what was inside. She tilted her head. Then smiled. "Playing games, are we?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. She walked away humming. And I realized something horrifying. She knew what I was doing. And she didn't like it. There's something about silence in a house that should never feel peaceful. And that morning, the silence had weight. Like the air was holding its breath. The echo, the thing wearing Lila's face, was nowhere to be found. Her shoes were by the door. Her cereal bowl untouched on the counter. But she was gone. I should have felt relieved. I didn't, because the house felt wrong. Off balance. Like something had been watching me watch it, and decided to step away just long enough to make me wonder if it was ever there. I checked every room, every corner. Nothing. Then I stood in front of Lila's bedroom door. It was closed. Which was strange, she never closed it. Not even when she was mad. I hesitated. My fingers hovered just above the knob. My mind screamed not to go in. But I opened the door anyway. The air inside was cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from an open window or bad insulation. This was a dead cold, like something had sucked the life out of the space. The room looked normal at first. The bed was made. Toys arranged neatly on shelves. Her desk had a stack of drawings, all carefully ordered. But it was too perfect. As if someone, or something, was trying too hard to imitate what a child's room should look like. I stepped inside. The moment my foot crossed the threshold, I felt it, the pull. Same as the leg. A low hum at the base of my spine, vibrating in my teeth. Something was here. I moved to the closet. The door was slightly ajar. When I opened it fully, I expected to see clothes, boxes, toys. But I didn't. I saw a tunnel. Not literal, physical, more like a hole in the idea of space. A void that seemed to shimmer like heat over pavement. It looked like reality had been peeled back. Inside, the walls were scribbled with hundreds of symbols. Spirals, slashes, stars. Some small, some stretching across the beams. But the worst part? They were glowing. Faintly. Pulsing like veins. And in the center of the closet floor, surrounded by the symbols, was a small object. I knelt to pick it up. It was Lila's missing sock. The one she'd been wearing the day of the accident. The real one. Still soaked. Still muddy. Still warm. I dropped it and stumbled back, breath catching in my throat. My head spun. None of this was real. None of it made sense. And then a voice whispered, "No," sighed from behind me. "You weren't supposed to find this yet." I turned. She was standing in the doorway. That same pleasant, empty smile. "What is this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. "What is that thing in the closet?" She looked at it calmly, almost bored. "An in-between," she said. "A door. To where?" She didn't answer. So I pressed. "Where is my daughter?" She looked at me, tilting her head like a bird. "You're asking the wrong question." "Then what's the right one?" She stepped closer. Her eyes locked onto mine. "Why did you forget?" That hit like a brick. "I didn't," I whispered. "But I had. Little things. Her favorite snack. The time she broke her arm. The exact shape of her baby teeth. And the more I forgot, the stronger this thing had become. I could feel it. "You're feeding off my memory of her," I said. "Aren't you?" She didn't blink. Not feeding. Replacing. I lunged forward. Grabbed her shoulders. Shook her. "Where is she?" She didn't even flinch. "She's not gone," she said softly. "She's just somewhere else. Somewhere you put her." I froze. I didn't put her anywhere. But then it hit me. The leg. The scream. The 2 seconds of silence before I pulled her from the water. Had I pulled her out? Or had something else come up instead? My mind reeled, twisting back on itself. I tried to remember the hospital. Her room. The IVs. The bruises. But the memories were slippery. I couldn't hold on to them. I couldn't picture the nurses' faces. I couldn't even remember signing the discharge papers. Had I ever? I looked back into the closet. The door. She followed my gaze. You want her back? Yes, I breathed. You'll have to go where you lost her. The lake. She smiled wider. No, before that. I stared at her, and she said, you have to go into the empty. Suddenly the light bulb in the room flickered. The symbols on the closet walls pulsed in rhythm, faster now, brighter. She stepped backward and vanished into the hallway, and the door slammed shut behind her. I ran to it, yanking at the knob. It wouldn't move. Then the walls began to hum. Low at first, then louder. A deep, growling sound like the earth itself was waking up. And then the closet opened wider. Not just the door, the entire closet deepened. The tunnel stretched further, revealing something new at the far end. A mirror, just standing there. But it wasn't reflecting me. It was showing her. Lila, the real one, sitting cross-legged on the floor, crying. And just behind her, something moved. Tall, thin, stretching out of the shadows. I couldn't make out its face, just its eyes, glowing white. I screamed her name, and she looked up. Her eyes locked with mine through the mirror. Mama, she whispered. The closet went dark, and the door behind me flung open, nearly knocking me over. She stood there, the echo, arms crossed. You weren't supposed to remember this much, she said, almost annoyed. But you did. And now, she paused. Now you'll have to choose. I wanted to run, to scream, to shove her down the stairs and burn the house down. But instead I whispered, choose what? Her face softened, and she said something that broke me. Between her and the life you built without her. Then she walked away. I collapsed against the door frame, because the worst part? For a split second, I didn't know what I'd choose. I waited until she was asleep. The echo, I mean. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe she just wanted me to think she slept. Either way, I waited. And when the house was quiet, too quiet, I stood in front of the closet again. The symbols were still there, faintly glowing under the surface, like scars beneath skin. The tunnel shimmered at the edges, like it was breathing. I took one last breath of the real world, and stepped inside. Everything fell away. Not literally, I wasn't falling. It was more like unplugging. Like pulling a cord out of an outlet and realizing you'd been powered by something external your whole life. The dark here wasn't dark like night. It was the kind of dark that looked back. But the further I walked, the more I could see. Not with my eyes. Those were useless now. I saw with memory. Fragments floated in the blackness like leaves caught in wind. Moments. Echoes. There was Lila's first birthday, her smashing a cupcake with both fists. There was her small hand wrapped around my finger in the NICU. There was her tiny voice saying, I love you for the first time. But all of them were decaying. Each memory had holes in it, blurred edges, sound missing, color gone. I ran to catch them, to hold them. But they crumbled the moment I touched them. Something was eating them. And then I heard it. A sound that wasn't sound. It was like 1,000 whispers stitched together. Too fast, too many languages. A swarm of voices. Then a figure stepped forward from the dark. Not the echo. Not Lila. Me. I was staring at myself. But not as I am. No makeup, no fear, no exhaustion. This version of me was clean. Unscarred. Younger. She smiled. You're getting close. What is this place? I whispered. The empty, she said like it was obvious. The space between what was, and what you made yourself believe instead. I shook my head. I didn't choose to forget her. She stepped closer. Didn't you? And behind her, something began to take shape. A doorway. But not back to my world. This door was pulsing. Like a living thing. What's through there? I asked. She didn't answer. Just moved aside. And behind her I saw a hospital room. Dim light. A steady beep of machines. A small figure in a bed. My heart broke. It was Lila. Pale. Hooked to monitors. Wrapped in blankets far too big for her. I walked forward like a sleepwalker. You don't remember this, the other me said. You buried it. I reached the edge of the doorway. A nurse was writing notes. A doctor murmured something. I couldn't hear. It was like I was watching a memory sealed behind glass. And then the machines began to flatline. I screamed. Pounded the glass. Do something. I yelled. No one looked up. I watched myself run into the room. Watched myself drop to the floor beside the bed, sobbing. And then it flickered. The whole scene shimmered and changed. Suddenly I wasn't in a hospital anymore. I was at the lake, kneeling in the sand, holding a limp, dripping girl in my arms. Lila, unmoving. And then another shimmer. The hospital again. Then the lake. Then nothing. Just me. And the other me, staring each other down. What is this? I asked, tears streaming down my face. What's the truth? She reached into her pocket and held out something small. The spiral. The same one Lila, the echo drew everywhere. It wasn't drawn. It was carved into bone. What is that? I whispered. The price, she said. For what? For forgetting. I stepped back. I didn't ask to forget. She finally showed emotion, eyes flashing. You didn't want to remember, so something gave you the option. The lake didn't just take her. It offered you a choice. And you? She stepped closer. You chose the version where you didn't have to live with it. And suddenly it all clicked. The accident. The scream. The impossible recovery. Lila home within days. No brain damage. No complications. Drawing spirals. The hallucinations. The missing photos. The holes in my memory. It wasn't that the world forgot. I did. I made a deal with something. And in return, it gave me her. An imitation. A placeholder. An echo. So I wouldn't have to feel the pain. I dropped to my knees. And in the silence, I asked the one question I had avoided for too long. Can I undo it? The other me softened. Yes. But only one way. I looked up. And behind her, a new door opened. A small girl stood inside, wearing a raincoat, holding a stuffed bunny. Lila. The real one. Alive. But her eyes were full of sadness. She stepped forward slowly. Mommy? I choked out her name. She nodded. You almost forgot me. I'm so sorry, I cried. She held out her hand. I took it, and the world split. The cymbals flared around us. A sound like 1,000 screams and 1,000 lullabies at once filled the air. Then, silence. I opened my eyes. I was back, in the closet. Lila was in my arms. Real, warm, breathing. The echo was gone. No humming. No cymbals. Just us. I looked around the room. The tunnel had vanished. The walls were blank. It was over. Almost. I walked her down the stairs. Held her close the whole time. Afraid she'd vanish again. But she didn't. She was real. Oh. I missed you, she whispered. I never stopped looking, I said. And it was true. Even if I forgot, somewhere deep down, I never stopped. For the first 2 days it was perfect. Lila, my Lila, was back. Not the hollow-eyed mimic I'd been pretending to mother. Not the stranger in my home. This was the girl I remembered. Every little thing confirmed it. The way she hummed when she colored, the tiny scar on her chin from when she tripped on the sidewalk, the way she said ambulance instead of ambulance. She remembered everything too. The lake, the accident, the darkness, even the door. We didn't talk about it much. Some things just don't belong in the light. So I did what any mother would do when hell finally spits your child back out. I pretended we were normal again. We made pancakes. We went on walks. We binged cartoons and ate popcorn, and I didn't let her out of my sight for a second. But on the third night, something changed. I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Light careful. Not hers. They stopped just outside my bedroom door. I held my breath. Then, a long dragging sound. Like something being pulled. Or someone. I threw the covers back, hard in my throat, and swung the door open. The hallway was empty. I checked Lila's room. She was asleep. Sick. Clutching her stuffed bunny so tight her fingers were white. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it, until I saw the scratches. On the floorboards. Deep grooves. Fresh. Leading away from her door. I followed them. They stopped at the closet in the hallway. I opened it. Nothing. But the smell, like wet earth and static, was back. Something had followed us. And it was waiting. The next day, Lila didn't eat her cereal. She just stared out the window, eyes unfocused. You okay, honey? I asked. She blinked slowly. He's hungry. The spoon slipped from my hand and clattered in the sink. Who's hungry? She didn't answer. Just kept staring outside. I knelt beside her. Lila. She turned to look at me. And for a moment, her eyes weren't her eyes. Too wide. Too black. Then she blinked and they were normal again. She smiled. Weakly. Can we go to the park today? I said yes. Because I didn't know what else to do. That night I checked the hallway again. More scratches. Deeper this time. Like whatever it was had claws. I sprinkled salt across the threshold. I whispered a prayer I hadn't said since childhood. And then at 3:12 a.m. I heard it. A voice. From inside the closet. It wasn't words. It was a rhythm. A breath. In and out. Like something enormous just on the other side of the wood. Waiting. Hungry. And behind that, faint but clear. You. The next day Lila drew something. She was always drawing, ever since she came back. But this one was different. It was a circle. A black spiral, same as before. But in the center, something new. A face. Long, stretching, impossibly tall. Eyes like lanterns. And something in its mouth. A figure. Small. Human. Lila had drawn herself. I asked her what it was. She whispered, "It's what got out when I came back." I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I pulled out every book I could find. Old occult texts. My grandmother's journals. Internet forums that most people would call conspiracy madness. I looked for symbols. For clues. And one name kept repeating. The Hollow Man. A figure from folklore older than anything I'd heard before. Not a ghost. Not a demon. A placeholder. It filled the space left behind when something was lost. It slipped into cracks in memory, into grief and guilt. It didn't steal people. It waited for you to give them up. The lore was clear on one point. If you make a deal with the Hollow Man, whether you know it or not, something always comes back with the person you try to save. And now it was here. In my house. And it wanted more. That evening, I noticed something new on Lila's back. Marks. 3 of them. Small, dark circles, like brands. They hadn't been there yesterday. When I touched one, she flinched. "It's okay," she said quietly. "He said I'll only feel them until you remember." "Remember what?" I asked. She just looked at me. Not scared. Not sad. Just waiting. That night, I dreamed of the lake. The water was glass. Black as oil. I walked toward it, barefoot, the sand cold under my feet. And on the shore there he stood. Tall. Twisting. The Hollow Man. His face was blank. Just skin stretched tight like paper over a skull. But I knew he was smiling. He opened his arms. And behind him, in the water, another Lila. Sinking. Still. Eyes wide. Mouth open in a silent scream. I ran. Screamed. Dove into the water. But it wasn't water anymore. It was memories. Slippery. Shifting. Every time I grabbed for her, I relived something I didn't want to feel. The sound of machines flatlining. The scream I let out in the hospital hallway. The moment I said yes to something I didn't understand because the alternative was too awful to bear. And when I finally reached her, she looked at me and said, "You didn't pull me out. You pulled him in." I woke up screaming. I rushed to Lila's room. Empty. Sheets cold. Her drawings, gone. On the wall, scratched into the plaster, were 3 words. "We're sharing." I drove back to the lake. Didn't pack. Didn't call anyone. Just grabbed the keys and left like I was sleepwalking. Like something deep inside me had already decided that's where it would end. The road was empty. Same as it was the night of the accident. But this time I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I didn't question. I knew. I remembered. Lila had drowned. Not almost. Not briefly. She was gone. She slipped from my hands and I screamed until my throat tore. I dove after her, but the water was dark, the current fast. I found her limp body tangled in reeds. I dragged her to the shore. I begged. I screamed. I pressed my lips to hers and begged God, the sky, anyone. And something answered. Not with words. With a presence. The air changed. The wind stopped. The world stilled. And from behind me something said, "You don't have to lose her." I didn't turn around. I didn't look. I just said yes. And everything changed. Lila coughed. Opened her eyes. Cried. Alive. At least I thought. Now I stood at the edge of that same lake, the wind bitter, the trees whispering. The water was still. Too still. I stepped into it barefoot. The cold bit deep into my bones, but I didn't care. I walked until it reached my waist. Then my chest. Then I dropped under. No panic. No gasping. Just silence. And then, light. I wasn't in the lake anymore. I was somewhere beneath it. A world upside down. Reflections drifted like ghosts. And in the center of it all stood the Hollow Man. Tall. Eyeless. Ageless. His arms were open again. But this time I didn't approach. I spoke. I want her back. The real her. He tilted his head. The skin of his face stretched thin, revealing a long slit where a mouth should be. You made a choice. I was desperate. Desperation is the clearest form of consent. Then I'm changing it. A sound rumbled from him, Not laughter, not quite. More like a shuddering. A million wings beating in unison. He moved aside, and behind him 2 figures. Lila. One stood tall, still, expressionless. The echo. The other, tired, pale, fragile. But her eyes, they were hers. The real one. She looked at me and whispered, "He won't let go." The hollow man turned toward her, placing a long-fingered hand on her shoulder. "One must stay. One must feed the forgetting." I stepped forward. "No more deals," I said. "Take me instead." He paused, then slowly reached into his chest, pulled something out. A mirror. But the reflection wasn't me. It was him, wearing my skin, living my life, raising Lila. In my place. "You give yourself," he said. "You give it all. You vanish. No memory. No trace." I looked at her, my daughter. She was crying. "Please don't go," she said. I looked at the other Lila, the echo. She stood still, unfeeling, a vessel. I turned back to the hollow man. "What happens to her?" He didn't answer, because I already knew. If I stayed behind, if I took her place, the echo would become me. A new mother. Perfect. Emotionless. Safe. A copy to match the copy. No pain. No scars. Just function. But Lila would have no real mother. Again. And that was the truth I hadn't faced. The real horror. It wasn't that I'd lost her. It was that I'd been willing to live with a lie just to feel better. "No," I said. He hissed. "You refuse the forgetting? I choose the truth." I reached for Lila. Not the echo. The real one. He shrieked. The reflections shattered. The water became fire. He lunged, but I wrapped myself around Lila and screamed, "I remember!" And the world exploded. When I woke up, I was coughing up lake water. On the shore. Holding her. The real her. Alive. Breathing. We were both shivering, but she looked up at me and smiled. "You didn't leave me," she whispered. "Never," I said. Behind us the lake was still. But the hollow man was gone. At least from here. Later, at home, I burned every drawing with spirals. Every page she'd made as the echo. Every trace of him. I found one last drawing tucked under her bed. 2 figures. One mother. One daughter. Holding hands. And above them in careful child handwriting. "This one is real." A month passed. No signs. No drawings. No spiral symbols. No hollow man. Lila was safe. Smiling again. Eating pancakes with too much syrup. We laughed together. We healed. We forgot. Or tried to. Because deep down I knew something wasn't finished. Not quite. It began with the mirrors. First, the bathroom. I'd be brushing my teeth and for a second, just a blink, I'd catch it. My reflection standing still while I moved. Then the hallway mirror. It was subtle. Too subtle to be anything, right? That's what I told myself. Until the day I found Lila staring into the full-length mirror in her room, unmoving, her hand gently pressed against the glass. "Sweetheart," I called. She didn't answer, just kept staring. Hypnotized. When I touched her shoulder, she jolted and turned around. She was crying. "What did you see?" I whispered. She didn't look at me, just said, "She's still there." I took the mirror down that night, locked it in the basement. It didn't help. Lila started waking up at 3:12 a.m. every night. Same time as before. Each time she'd cry softly, say the same thing. "She's calling me." At first I thought she meant the hollow man. But one night she clarified. "No, the other me." I reached out to people. Paranormal forums. A woman in Maine who specialized in entities tied to memory. She told me something chilling. "You didn't kill it," she said. "You broke the deal." That's not the same thing. What does that mean? It means the hollow man didn't die. He simply went back to sleep. But when something is pulled from his world, there's always an echo left behind. I didn't understand. Then she asked, "When Lila came back, are you sure it was the right one?" I went cold. I saw her. I felt it. I knew. "Memory isn't fact," she said gently. "Especially when he's involved. He uses your love like a map." I hung up. I didn't want to hear it. I clung to what I knew. But then, I started noticing it again. Little things. Lila loved spaghetti. Now she said she hated it. She used to say, "ambulance." Now she said, "ambulance," perfectly. The scar on her chin? Gone. But the drawing was what did it. I found it folded in her backpack. 2 girls. Both labeled me. One smiling. One staring blank. And below them she'd written, "She says I'm the wrong one." I demanded answers. Lila, I said, kneeling beside her. Tell me what's going on. Please. She hesitated, then whispered. She didn't go away when I came back. My heart thundered. She's still inside. Sometimes I hear her thoughts. Sometimes I see what she sees. She's trapped behind glass. I nearly vomited, because I remembered the echo. The fake Lila. The one who drew spirals and said strange things. The one I thought I'd banished. But what if I'd gotten it wrong? What if, in my desperation, I had pulled the echo into our world, thinking she was the real one? I went back to the lake one final time. This time with no prayers. No offerings. Just truth. I shouted into the still water. If you're listening, show me. Show me what I did. Silence. Then, ripples. A shape rose to the surface. A mirror. Floating. I stepped into the water, heart pounding. Picked it up. It was fogged. Then it cleared. 2 figures. One me. One Lila. And behind her, another Lila. Trapped in darkness. Hands against glass. Eyes wide, pleading. Mouth silently forming one word. Mom? I dropped the mirror. Screamed. Because I knew. I brought back the wrong one. I didn't tell her. Not yet. What would I even say? Sorry, sweetheart, you're not really you? She was sweet. She was kind. She thought she was my daughter. But now, I understood. She wasn't possessed. She was the echo. A shell filled with everything I wanted to see. I'd chosen her. And the real Lila, the true human scared little girl, was still trapped. Somewhere. Maybe behind glass. Maybe inside the hollow man's twisted world. But not here. Not free. One final drawing. The night before her 9th birthday, I tucked her in and found a new sketch folded under her pillow. 2 versions of her again. But this time one was cracking. Splintering like a mirror hit by a hammer. And at the bottom, in neat, quiet handwriting. Soon she'll come through. I sleep lightly now. All mirrors are covered. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear the sound of glass stretching. Whining. Like something pressing against it from the other side. Something that remembers drowning. Something that remembers me. And I can't stop wondering, when that final crack comes, who will be standing in my daughter's skin? And who will be watching? From the other side of the glass?